Welcome back to the breakfast. Well, it's time for our hot topic, and today we'll be having one hot topic, one very hot topic. And we have as our guest to discuss this very hot topic, Mr. Abraham Great, public affairs analyst who's joining us from Canada. Good morning, Mr. Great.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me once again.
How are you doing?
I'm actually fantastic. It is working.
Oh, good.
I'm just playing around with your name. It's great to have Great on the program. So it's
Wow.
great to have Great on the program today. Welcome.
It's also great to be with you.
Yeah, so Mr. Great, 19 days from now, we'll be having a new president in Abuja. And that's amid petitions at the presidential election tribunals. What should Nigerians be expecting is one of the things we'll be taking a look at today. Also, we want to be taking a look at the impact and changes that the Electoral Act 2022 has brought to our polity and democracy. So let's start with the impact and the changes that this new Electoral Act, the amended Electoral Act, has brought to the fore this time around.
I think, I would think one of the major premise of what necessitated the amendment of the Electoral Act, which has led to the 2022 Electoral Act, is the digitalization of our voting system. That's why we had to upgrade from the Electoral Act of 2010 into the Electoral Act of 2022. Now, we have made a lot of progress in terms of legislature and policies under the Ninth Assembly, particularly towards the end of the administration. A lot of progress is made because every country that is going to move forward has to actually have policies that are in vogue, policies that are current or policies that meet the needs of its people. However, saying that, we still see from the aftermath of the election that there are, lacunas, or there are loopholes still, even in that Electoral Act, particularly for me, the sessions that has to do with consequences of election practices, like looking from Section 126, downward. There seems to be consequences, but for me, a lot of those consequences seems just repeated from the previous Electoral Act, or not really serious repercussion. 500,000 for somebody, that breach election laws. Those seems to me not to be stringent. Policy enough. But again, this last election give rooms again for the legislature to look into the Electoral Act. So for me, I see a lot of progress that have been made in having a new Electoral Act. However, you could see the big gap of what we had, particularly with the Section 134 of that Electoral Act, where we're having, is it in conjunction, is it this, is it that? Even though there are case law that can justify one position or the other, the Electoral Act needed to be more explicit. I would have interpreted that section to mean that by that policy saying in one subsection that you make 25% in 2/3 of the state and the FCT. I would have thought, but that is not the final, because we'll wait for the court to interpret as needed. But from my own legal background, I would have thought that if FCT was so important, then it will reflect on the Nigerian constitution that Abuja has a special electoral college status. But because Nigeria does not have such status in any part of the country, carrying more weight than the other, then if that was been the case, my simple interpretation was that instead of it to be an addendum or a joiner or a conjunction to a subsection of the law, it would have been 134C rather than be part of B. So, but then I am not the judge, and I'm not, I don't have that legal, fine finalism also to determine what the interpretation of that law is. But literally, to me, in the law, that is what it would mean,
Okay, well, still talking about the effect of this electoral act, and one of it is the electronic transmission of results. Let's look at the ruling, the judgment that was given yesterday by the Supreme Court in the Osun State governorship election, where part of what was said is that the transmission of results via beavers is not the only way to decide a winner. Respond to that for us, if you would.
Okay, so I mean, that judgment actually excites me, or probably would excite my mom more, as a relative is celebrating and dancing now, and is one that I've not really fully read the. I was just following Twitter feeds because of the fact that I know that a little bit is so concerning to my mom. I didn't want to go into it emotionally and thinking that we should be celebrating victory. But it's a very, very important precedence that has been laid yesterday. And that here, the interpretation for me is in the same alignment with what I've thought since that election tribunal started. And what I think the law is saying, or what the Supreme Court is saying, is that, look, it is not IREF that gives the final results of what election is. The final result of the election are supposed to be under beavers. And what that judgment is saying, in my understanding of it, even though I've not looked at it pedantically, is that, look, election results are already collated from each polling unit to the collation centers, and that party agents and party representatives already have those results. And so if we're going to take anything in the court, we will be relying more on the beavers, the accredited votes on the beavers, rather than relying on the IREF. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So that is a very powerful judgment that could mean a very serious precedence for the upcoming election. But in law, you cannot interpret literally and just think because one case has been decided in this way, it's definitely going to be that way. Then we don't need to go to court then if we all have the answers already. But this gives us room to study that case a lot more. And, I wouldn't expect anything because I think already we can see the direction that the presidential election petitions are already going as well.
Okay, but how would you rate how much this electoral act, which you are applauding as the game changer in this 2023 election, how would you say it has worked? Is it playing out the way you hoped it was going to play out, or there's something else that is missing? Because if there is no difference between this election that happened in 2023 with the Electoral Act of 2022 from what has been happening before now, then it makes no sense. So how would you rate the performance, as it were, of the Electoral Act in the 2023 election, both presidential and gubernatorial elections?
Like I said, I don't think it's a perfect act yet, because there are still rooms for a lot of improvement. Well, one big thing that this has changed in the Nigerian electoral system is one major problem that we have had since 1959, which is the ambiguity around our census, our voting numbers from different regions in the country. In that, in this case now, even though it has started since 2015 election, we have now seen electronic voting to be more consequential to the outcome of our election. So you see for example, we have about 90 million plus voters. And right now is the first election in Nigeria, the lowest turnout Now, that is not only because people did not come out. There are a lot of ambiguity that has been complained of since 1959 census that the British conducted before we had the independence. So it as always appears that there are some ambiguous numbers that comes from certain quarters of the country that this last election seems to be telling us. In fact, if you are looking at it literally, it's very difficult for you to assume and think that APC played a game and they rigged. The dynamics of this election, it is too peculiar for you to just blanket, unless you're actually being emotional, for you just to be saying, oh, they rigged it, what have you. It doesn't appear so. It appeared to be a very, very real. Maybe there are some suppression or what have you in areas, all over the world. People do things, they propaganda, they push an area, in fact, in some cases, they cause traffic. It happens everywhere in the world. So for me, it's not a final, document, but it has made a huge difference.
Okay, let me go to Abraham Great. You've been waiting for a very long time. We are talking about a new era. We're talking about a new psyche for the Nigerian people. But having a new era, new psyche for our people, they need to know the things that they can contribute as well to making Nigeria great. Because we've been relying on the government all the time. So for us to get the kind of Nigeria of our dream as a people, not necessarily the government now, what do you think we should start looking at to change or to do better to make Nigeria as great as we want it to be?
Thank you. I think I'll take it from the last questions that my co-panelists are, debating in terms of how the East, plays the election. We have to be able to understand that we need to redefine our beginning. Almost like 1999 was a new beginning, the Fourth Republic, but we have to go back to why are we in this way where the East, are voting in their own way and what have you. We have to go back to the fact that this country was regional before it was put together, before the amalgamation. So the differences, we haven't really sorted out the issue of our differences. And we saw that through the system of governance that we had before the independence, the unitary system. We saw that in the kind of politics that Nnamdi Azikiwe, Awolowo was suggesting before we went with the federal system that we should have 6 regions. That's what we're doing now, in terms of how we describe our area, south, southeast, southwest. And the man was suggesting at the time that, look, let's make this country more like a parliamentary system where each of the region will be like Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, and each of them will have their own constitution or unwritten constitution and will operate by their own codes. Now, that is again at the back end of what then happened in the 1960s, the war. So the Southeast have not fully recovered from this. And I'm going to say this, that if we're going to be better as a nation, there has to be a committee of national unity, almost similar to what we have in the CONFAB, but the CONFAB was
There's
more
no need for
about
national
restructuring the
unity.
country. Hello?
Oshoma is
So-
agreeing with you on that.
Go on.
Huh?
Oshoma,
go on.
Yeah,
Oshoma,
so-
hold on. Let him finish, then you respond to what he said.
No, just a side comment. I'm not sorry.
Go ahead, Great.
Okay. Okay, so I'll let others weigh in. But my belief is that, it is very possible. America had this for many decades, where the East is having problem with the South, and power never went to the South for considerable number of years. But they were eventually able to overcome this thing by having dialogues, having caucuses, discussing issue. The South, the East, the West, the North would need to come together at some point and rethink. And each region, elders need to come together and say how we play politics needs to change. If there's anything that I learned, from some part of the country, is the fact that you see that many part of the country, like the western part of the country, the little of the history that I know there, they've had several wars. They've had many wars that have separated them. But at some point, they have come together as a unit that you almost could not tell the difference between Ekiti and Oshun and what have you. I mean, I grew up that way. Either it's religion or what have you. You see that we are both Christian and Muslim in this family, but we're still one. Even though we still have a war in that part of the in the southwest, that's Modakeke and Ile-Ife war. But that is also more political. So I think we can actually come to the point where every part of the country can begin to see each other as one nation. I think it is possible when we decide to do that. So our mindset needs to change. That's one area that we need to. And if on a final note, if I may say, one other area that we need to change is that we need to come to this mindset, or come up the mindset where we think that government should do everything. I blame government that they have not even attained the main thing yet, according to Maslow's hierarchy of need, where the physiological need in the country is not even met yet. So I can understand why people are overly reliant. But at some point, we need to break up from our dependency on most of which local government, state government should do, and expecting that it's a president that must fix every problem in the country. We need to go back to America and remember what they did when they were in poverty. The tycoons, people like J.C. Morgan, people like John D. Rockefeller, these people started industry, and this has already begun in Nigeria. And we need to change our mindset and see that we're on a trajectory into something big as a nation.
Who is talking with us from Canada right now, and Justice Ohuegbu, human rights lawyer, talking with us from Abuja. We also have had Liboros Oshoma, legal practitioner, talking to us here from Lagos. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll take